Good. All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the October meeting of the Conservation Commission. We have established a quorum and we'll go ahead with a call to attendance.
Yeah. I'll start in person. Randy,
Here.
Pete,
Pleasure to be here.
Dick,
Good to see you in person.
Jessica.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, great. And staff present, just
So we have Angela Blanchett, our town engineer, and Autumn Spear, our planning director on Zoom.
great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Let me open with a land acknowledgement to begin our time together, acknowledging and honoring all Indigenous people, the people who came here before us and nurtured this place as stewards of Mother Earth. This acknowledgement is to be aware that our land is unceded and that issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing in the Wabanaki homeland. I acknowledge the Owasquawag people who once lived in what is now Scarborough, and that as we support efforts for land and water protection, we honor the current tribes who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. So, let's go through voting on the minutes and then we'll talk about what we're going to talk about tonight.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes from last meeting, even though I'm not at the last meeting.
We have a second.
Seconded.
Great. And it looks like Maggie has just joined us.
All right, we roll call.
Okay.
Randy,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Dick.
Yes.
Maggie,
Yes.
Jessica.
Yes.
Thank you.
Terrific. So tonight we have a good bit on the agenda. We're continuing our conversation about recommendations for resource protection, wetland buffers, and more. And we've gotten some good work done in between the meetings that we'll be discussing tonight. In advance of our meeting tonight, Pete circulated something that I hope that we'll be taking a look at together. And then there's an update on the open space ad hoc committee, which we may address at 6:45. We may address it later because town councilor Shoup is going to be joining us a little later in the evening, and she'd like to be here for that part of the discussion. And then we have an update on the Spurwick Marsh restoration. And I guess we're going to talk about what are we doing in 2024. And then our assorted updates. How does that sound, everyone? Good, yes. Okay. And
Looks like she's.
welcome, Kathleen. Oh, we've just gone through what we're going to be talking about tonight, so you joined at a good time. Do we have anyone here who would like to make a public comment? It looks like no, there's nobody in the room that's not a member of the public and nobody online. Okay, so let's turn to the recommendation for environmental standards for natural resource protection. If I could, Autumn, ask you to just give us a quick please summary update of how you prepared for and walked us through this process to date. And then we can then, I think I'll turn it over to you, Pete, if that's okay, you and Dick. Okay.
Sure. So a few months ago, Jamie and Angela and I met and we really took a look at Portsmouth as our example, and then put together sort of the framework for what we thought would be a good idea for environmental standards for wetlands and vernal pools and other resources that we wanted to protect. And so since those meetings, I did get to present this to the Long Range Planning Committee in September, and I believe you all received their minutes from that meeting. They had some examples they thought would be good to look at. They didn't look at any numbers. They just were really reviewing the framework and really wanted to make sure that we have the science to back up whatever the numbers end up being proposed. But other than that, that's really about it. Just looking at a couple of examples and then what we know from a staff perspective in the development, right? So what we'd like to see, knowing that we need some protections in place, what we struggle with on a regular basis during the development process for planning board and for subdivision review, just sort of taking that knowledge that we have. So haven't changed or added anything since we last spoke about it.
Right, thank you, Autumn, thanks.
Mhm.
The whole team who worked on that, and what we know, helped me refine this, and welcome, Rita, I just want to acknowledge you're with us too. That our standards right now and our regulations right now are fairly minimal. We don't really have any kind of measurement of setbacks and buffers that we're talking about right now. So the drafts that the staff team had prepared take us in a major step forward. And we reviewed that together as a commission, and I sensed that and heard that we really wanted to do this right in the first go round. Even knowing that we may have, we could put something forward as a recommendation, and there's going to be, once it leaves the commission, it's going to go through a process that may have some back and forth on that and some changes. That once we put something forward, it doesn't preclude us from making future recommendations for more or less or any kind of change. So what I took from that is one, on one hand, something is better than nothing. On the other hand, this commission wants to do it right and not just sort of play guessing games. And we were eager to hear what each of us may have researched and discovered. And then what I know right now is that Dick and Pete have looked into further information, and Pete has something that he's going to walk us through tonight. But I also want to open it up the floor if anyone else has something that they want to propose or present in addition. And seeing nothing.
I just have a quick process question.
Yeah.
Are we committed to finalizing recommendations tonight, or is this still part of our?
I think that's going to be hard, because I
Okay.
think at this point, what I think makes sense is that we finalize and approve recommendations once we've had that discussion, and it felt like we were almost there last time we met, but there were still more questions. We wanted to do some more research. So now we have some more research. I think it's worth really working that through, and then the following meeting committing to a decision. Does that make sense? Jamie's.
Yeah, and we learned last week that the ordinance committee isn't actually going to meet again this year.
Oh.
The election
Wow.
and all of that, so
Okay.
it gave us a little bit more time
Okay,
now to
good and
work on that.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
That's
for
great.
their regular meeting timing, it didn't make sense since there is going to be an election before that. They won't have the opportunity to kind of make their committee assignments, and then it's the holidays and all of that. So
okay. And it may mean the town council's goals will change too.
And
I
then-
will,
Oh, go ahead, Autumn.
oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, I will add that if tonight and based on the feedback that you guys have given already, we can work on revising the draft and then bring it back in November. I can take it back to long range planning committee in December. And so we'll at least get that through. And so we'll be first on the list, hopefully in January. So I would keep on track in that regard.
And Maggie, you have your hand up.
That was my question, is when next year? I mean, it sounds like it's January.
It may not be. I have a list of about 8 things. So it'll
Okay,
really
so it could be
be,
February or March.
it could be, but it'd be nice if we could have it ready to go. That would be the goal. So I would try to stay on track to get the draft ready by the next meeting in November, and then that would set you up for in a good place.
Perfect.
Yeah, I would be, so there are some I'm sorry, my puppy is commenting. There are some things in the comments that would be helpful to discuss, I think, at some point, because I'm not sure, first of all, I'm not sure who's making the comments. And then secondly, some of them make sense and some of them don't to me. So, I think that would be helpful. It would be helpful for me to discuss some of that.
We'll have a different version of this.
Let's start there. Thank you, Maggie. And maybe the first question, do we know who is making the comments? Are they different people? Is it a committee? Is it staff?
Yeah, this is just gonna take me a second to get up on the screen for everyone, so if you just bear with me for a minute.
Okay.
So the version that was in your packet, unfortunately, it didn't show who made the comments, but the version that's available to you in the shared folder, the Google Drive shared folder, you can see who made those comments. So, sorry about that. It was, if I created the PDF directly from Google Docs, you didn't see any of the comments. So I had to put it into Word and then make the.
So
PDF.
it's been a while, so refreshing my memory, I think this is what Pete commented because he wasn't able to attend the August 16th meeting. So we had his comments for the last meeting that we were seeing here. And I think we wanted to do a little bit more work on those. And so Maggie, you wanted to reflect on some of the comments?
Well, I was just looking on, and the pages aren't numbered, but the general standards that has the little table. I mean, I don't have any framework from which to make
Right.
recommendations about this footage. But for instance, wetlands 5 feet. I mean, why even bother? I mean, that to me, that looks like. So anyway, I maybe it was Pete said recommend minimum 75 feet for all with 125 feet setbacks. And that made sense to me. We might as well go for, something that's going to have some impact.
Maggie, so
Go ahead, Autumn.
the 5 foot was original. It's for the wetlands that are under 1,000 square feet. The much smaller. I'm not taking away their importance. I'm just trying to set the framework. That's why it was so low. So we could at least have the distance if we wanted to require any pins or fences or anything, that we could at least have that 5 foot buffer. So that's why that one's particularly low, is it's the wetlands under 1,000 square feet an area.
Okay.
Still feel free to change it. I just wanted you to know that that's
Okay.
sort of how that goes across.
And I think that's an ongoing struggle staff has, right now, with, to your point, not having a standard. My general's comment on any plan development is, can you give me 5 feet? Because you can't physically draw a line on a plan and be able to put erosion control and do whatever you have to do on a line that's the wetland. So I think that's where we were kind of staff was starting from, is the minimum has got to be at least 5 feet to be able to put your erosion sediment control in place. And like Autumn said, willing to talk about whatever you guys think is appropriate.
Great.
And Jessica has her hand up.
Yes, Jessica?
So it's not directly related to the 5 foot, but I do want to highlight that I found the schematic, the illustration incredibly informative. That was sent around earlier today. So that like, if we put something together that, what a wetland that's 1,000 square feet looks like, and then what the 5 foot buffer looks like, it might not seem quite so dramatic, right? To conceptualize it, I found that illustration incredibly helpful. And so maybe if, again, I know that's not in the ordinance itself, but as an educational piece, putting together the illustrations, I think could be really helpful in these discussions in general.
But before we go there, Maggie, was there anything else that you wanted to ask about the comments? Sorry, Jean.
No, it's fine.
No, there isn't.
Okay. Thank you. So let's,
Oh, I'm sorry, I just didn't know, does Jamie, do you have the city of Portsmouth's schematic?
Yeah,
Readily available.
I can pull it up.
I think
you want to start there?
it might be a good place to start, yeah. Because that, I think, is really well presented. I don't think some of their buffers are adequate.
And
But I
this is
think
what, the city of Portsmouth wetland buffer is what the
Some
team
things
started
based
with,
off,
or
right,
based
yeah.
this off.
Right,
Yeah.
we're not finding anything really mean
Right,
to be able to
Yeah.
start with, and this seemed as comparable as we could start from.
okay. Janie's pulling that up for everyone. Among the million documents we've got.
it's like, I forget what page it is on some of the stuff Dick has, but. I just clipped it by itself. You can forward you that if you want me to.
I got it. I just need to, I'm right there. It's just I opened the wrong folder.
But I agree, Jessica, a schematic which kind of looks at the landscape. And explains, and the schematic they have is a lot better than the cartoons I drew. But it really helps kind of picture how this is applied.
Mhm.
And my concern is with using the city of Portsmouth model was. The city of Portsmouth has a very different landscape. Than the town of Scarborough.
Right.
They have an urbanized waterfront, they've got a commercial district waterfront, they've got. A highly developed waterfront in some areas, and then it becomes more rural as you go inland. Similar to Scarborough, that part was similar, but. I think some of the things, in Portsmouth was a little bit different. But this is just a great schematic, I think, for. Kind of explaining how this could work, and I think whenever we come up with whatever we're gonna be doing. Having something like this to present to council
Mm.
is gonna be key.
Yeah.
Tables are good, but that nails it.
Is there ever any reason why we wouldn't be able to include this in an ordinance? A schematic, a drawing, or is ordinance just, words on a page?
I guess that's an Autumn question.
No,
We have.
I actually have add diagrams here under the table.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So once we finish with the dimensions, to add these diagrams to help us. I think the question is to define whether all wetlands are treated equally. So we tried to frame it to where different wetlands were worthy of different buffers. And so that was the question with the table. And then once we decide what that is, then we can include these diagrams to show you what that would look like. That was the idea.
yeah, and Autumn, I originally. One of my original comments in the document was, we should do 75 feet minimum for everything, and then I really thought a lot about what you. Said in the subsequent minutes. About kind of tiering the wetlands in terms of their importance, and then I also looked at, 1,000 square feet, and I looked at how much that is acreage wise. I mean, it's minute.
It's like the
1,000 square
size of a
feet is-
garage.
10,000 square feet is 0.2 acres, which is also small. So if we're prioritizing the protection of habitat corridors of. These larger contiguous areas. And to me, those smaller ones that are isolated, they are isolated wetlands. You can't just fill part of a larger. Wetland, at least that would be my hope.
Mhm.
You can't just fill 1,000 square feet of this, 1,000, because what I don't want to have happen is. The quilt is there and each patch gets kind of
Mm.
filled over time. So that even though the impacts are less than 1,000 square feet each time, you end up with 300,000 square feet of impact total. I didn't know if 1,000 square feet meant. That is the size of the overall wetland, or is that the size of the wetlands being filled?
Yep,
And that's a
so,
question.
That's
I
a good
didn't-
point.
Real
Is it the
critical
wetland,
point.
the
Yeah.
portion of the wetland that's on the parcel that's being developed?
And-
Okay,
That's my question too,
Yeah.
I think,
Because it could go across property boundaries.
Right.
Right,
Like you
and be
said,
part of a
it'd
bigger
be-
system.
Yeah.
yes,
And the direct analogy for me, at least in my head, is if you have 100 acres that you're developing and you're committing to 30% conserved, it's not this acre over here, that acre over there, that acre over there. It's, let's look at, work towards contiguous acreage. So same, that's the analogy I apply to this. So let's use this opportunity to get real clear about that. Like you
Yeah.
want all these different pieces and then you have this
Right.
whole wetland.
So, because cumulative impact to me is one of the biggest things that we need to think about in terms of this. And I don't think we've addressed it at this point, and I haven't addressed it in any of my schematics either.
Okay.
That kind of just came to me. If it's 1,000 square feet of isolated wetlands, I'm not, personally, I'm not concerned about that, but if it's 1,000 square feet on each property, for instance. Then cumulatively, that could have a pretty big impact.
Is there a way to address that by, like you have marsh migration zone, and I liken it to Chesapeake Bay's critical area. So if you're building what they've termed in the critical area, then everybody has to comply with certain regs.
I just don't know how you deal with cumulative impact.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Okay.
I mean, we struggle with that at the state level also, cumulative impact. Each project is reviewed on a case by case basis. And Autumn, I'm assuming it's the same thing, you guys, I'm assuming it's the same thing here. So each project is dealt in isolation of the other projects. They're not dealt with cumulatively over, 5 years, this is the impact. 10 years, this is the impact, or 300 properties, this is the impact.
Right, because it's similar to the state, you look at, there's common schemes, so you can kind of group as development, it's the same developer. Doing adjacent pieces and affecting the same wetland kind of resource. That's one thing, but then it's also puts it at in balance when. To your point, if there's many different property owners, the first one in gets to chop
Right.
out the most.
Right.
And does that make sense? And
Right.
yeah,
Property rights issue, yeah,
yes.
oh, yeah.
And so you start limiting the greater scheme. In a cumulative, puts others at a disadvantage that are coming in later and. For their property development, so I don't know how you address that.
Conversely, if you're picking off 1,000 square foot pieces of a larger system, for instance, it's going to take decades probably to have a significant impact on that system. Probably. It's my,
Can I just jump in? So I'm a little bit confused. If we're protecting the 1,000 square feet ones, we're not picking them off, but we're not proposing to protect them as the same level as the 10-acre. So I'm not sure we're still wanting to protect them. We're just not trying to put quite as many limitations on the development around them.
good point.
So is there maybe like a middle ground, 5 feet, 1,000 square feet is about the size of our garage, right? So if you have a garage on a 10-acre parcel that you're developing and we're asking, okay, you're protecting it, you put a 5-foot buffer around it. That's what Angela and I are typically looking for in the development process, just so we can put the pins, and if there's any sort of barrier to it, they can work. They don't have to get in the wetlands to work in it. So maybe, but we're still protecting it. We're still proposing it to be protected. So maybe that buffer gets increased to, 15 feet or something reasonable. Or are you all thinking that we should delineate certain areas of town? No matter what sort of wetland, it has to be a larger buffer. So there's like a couple of different ways to go about it. But we also have to really define what we're trying to protect. So we get to keep it. We don't want to kill the buffer for the 10-acre parcel because the garage size parcel, right? So there's got to be, I think that's why we like the idea of leveling up for importance. If possible, it seems to be, but it doesn't have to be 5 feet, that make sense, Pete?
Yeah, it does. I think the way to potentially address that, where everybody kind of was happy in terms of a response there, is to prioritize them based on the importance of the actual overall wetland. Not necessarily just the impact. So if it's 1,000 square feet of impact, but it's adjacent to, let's say, or in this area that we've defined as the marsh migration zone, for instance,
Mhm.
then the buffer is big. But if it's less than 1,000 square feet of impact, or less than 1,000 square feet of an isolated wetland that's not connected to any of this other stuff, yeah, then maybe the buffer can be much reduced. But if
Yeah,
it's,
Think that's the way it's
Okay.
written. So even if it crosses the property line, you wouldn't get only credit for your 1,000 square feet. So if you have 1,000 square feet on your property line, you're gonna have to, but if it's part of a greater wetland system, it's going to still be to require the greater buffer. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? That's the intention behind it. You don't just get to count what's in your square. So if it's contiguous to a larger area, you would still be required to do the larger buffer.
yes, okay, great.
So there's a really good example on the Turnpike right now where they're adding at Saco, where they're adding the new Turnpike toll booth. There's this tiny little vernal pool. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but it's there, and it's literally, they don't have anything around it, but it's coned off and you can just see the border. And every time I drive by it, I think, oh, so that would be where you would have your 5-foot buffer if it was just wetlands. But then if it was a larger area, it could be protected greater, but it's kind of just right in the middle of this site. And so that's what my thought process is. That's what would get the 5-foot area. But if the entire thing was wetlands, even if just a small piece was in that developable property, they would still have to do the larger buffer because it's part of a greater system.
Great, that's a good clarification.
So maybe that's not clear the way it's written, but I think that's the intent. So
And Kathleen had her hand up, but then it went down, so I just wanted to see if. Great. Kathleen, did you want to?
I mean, I just wanted to say, and then Pete kind of brought that question up, but is there a way that we could lay it out more clearly that prioritization of contiguous areas is part of, how the setbacks are, I mean, maybe that is there, but I wonder if there's a way to call it out in this particular section a little more clearly so that it's obvious why certain things are being prioritized.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kathleen, because I didn't see it either. It's good to hear that, it would go with the larger parcel, but wasn't clear to me.
Autumn and Marla both have hands up.
Oh, okay. I think Autumn's responding to the question.
oh, I was just saying, sure, I totally understand, and we can fix that language, and then we can even add some definition areas, and clean up the purpose statements a little bit, so it's really clear. Totally get it.
Would it make sense to clarify that in our, I have a table put together, you have a table put together, instead of just saying wetlands less than or equal to 1,000 square feet, would it say isolated wetlands?
Yeah,
Less than
something to that
1,000 square
effect, or
feet.
part of it part of a larger system.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can work on that, but I totally get what you're talking about.
I think that would clarify that pretty well.
Yeah, great.
And Marla, and then Dick.
Okay, hi. I just had a thought. I was wondering if it might be helpful to model what this might look like by taking the wetland layer of the wetland GIS layer and actually put these buffers around those wetlands to actually see what is the overall impact.
I think we definitely would want to do that for sure,
Yeah, and
at some point.
Autumn and I have both talked about that we plan to, before we go too much farther, once we have a sense of what sizes we're looking at, or if we have a couple kind of buffer widths that we want to consider, that we would do the mapping exercise to see what that looks like.
And Dick?
Marla's way ahead of me, that's just what I was gonna say.
Okay, great.
But to add a footnote to that, yesterday I was talking to somebody last week about the fact that there are very few vernal pools show up on the state map, significant vernal pools. Yesterday, I stumbled on a site that has a map of all the vernal pools, or not all of them, but a great number of vernal pools in Scarborough. And there's a bunch of red dots, and the red dots are all not significant vernal pools. Now, these are going to be your small wetlands. But it looks like a case of the measles. I mean, there's a lot to think about on these non-significant vernal pools. And it's right in line with what you're thinking about buffers, because if you've got these measles around this area, maybe you want to extend a buffer around a greater area, not just around that one vernal pool. I would really like to see that map brought up. I couldn't figure out a way to download it as a shapefile. It's just online, but I think the town should get it as a shapefile and include it in their GIS system, because it's highly significant to me.
Yeah, I've included it as a resource for us to consider in one of the tables put together.
And I think, Autumn, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we basically say that they need to do a vernal pool analysis in the springtime, when you can tell whether or not it's a significant vernal pool. And then so that, we're dealing with current and hopefully accurate information. And then we can make the determination, and this is another discussion that we should probably have about vernal pools. The state has a defined definition for what is a significant vernal pool. So I don't know that we necessarily want the same protection across the board but if it meets the criteria for a significant vernal pool, then we would ramp up additional protections for that pool.
Well, one of the things that has come to my attention, that there's a big difference between what the state considers significant and what we should consider significant. And this is brought to my attention by Andrew, but the fact that the beginning with habitat looks at statewide significant species, and we don't really care about most of them. What we really care about is species of local significance. And nobody's identified them yet, and this is something we should do. It's the same way with vernal pools. The state can say these are non-significant. We might think they're highly significant in Scarborough because we've got a different standard.
Thank you.
But there are set vernal pool species and like numbers of egg masses present, and for those specific species, for this process, we need something that we can evaluate it against. So I don't know that we can necessarily identify what the Scarborough specific significant species, vernal pool species are for this process. I don't know that we necessarily have the expertise on the Conservation Commission, and I think that that's going to prolong this process if we want to.
Yes, and so can you just speak to if there's an area where there's, a number of the red dots?
What, can I ask what resource that is? I know Pete
And IFNW.
It's IFNWs. Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
So there's an area with a number of red dots.
Pull that
Yeah.
summary dashboard.
We would have some level of confidence that they would be discovered during the analysis phase that DEP requires before.
So with any site plan subdivision, they're required to do the wetland delineation. As part of that, it's they, as their experts are doing that, soil scientists or whatnot, or wetland scientists, they look for vernal pools. And like Nancy said, we try to specify that April timeframe in order to make sure that we're hitting the right time. So the planning board does look at that and request it. And so we usually get a written report associated with those.
Okay. Thank you.
So it's individual to each site. So like you said, you might see a bunch of dots, what they get into, and even with the wetland, the National Wetland Inventory, what you're referring to, the wetlands on our GIS. There is a heck of a lot more wetlands in town than you're gonna see on that map. And as they come to your planning board, they have to do it site specific, so they'll have to do an analysis of wetlands and vernal pools on their site. That might not show up, like you said, if you're looking at the GIS.
Got it. Shifting to the two tables. I didn't have a chance to compare and contrast between Pete's draft and what we had before. Pete, do you have a sense, or did anyone who have had additional time have a sense of how far off we are from each other?
Some of these are significantly different because they use a different approach, especially in the areas adjacent to the Scarborough Marsh system or the marsh systems,
Okay,
because I include sea level rise as one of the critical factors in determining that zone. But the vegetative buffers themselves, I don't think they are different in some areas. They are different. Would you like me to walk you through this now?
thank
Okay.
you.
So the way I kind of thought about this was I put my geologist hat on and thought about sea level rise and the presentation we gave last week about marsh migration. And Kristen Purrier had some great slides about showing, how the marsh is already transitioning and how it's changing. So one of the things I thought of was, can we define our marsh migration zone, which is basically the setback? It can be defined in two ways, because I actually looked at Scarborough using our sea level rise viewer that we have. A link is down at the bottom of the under source. And thought about, okay, why don't we establish our setback to be the highest astronomical tide? So right now we've referenced the highest annual tide in the numbers. The problem with that is the highest annual tide changes every year. So every year you have a new number, and it can change several tenths of a foot each year. If you use the highest astronomical tide, it's a number that's going to be probably republished in 2024, and it'll be stable for the next 25 years.
Okay,
So then I thought, okay, let's look at highest astronomical tide plus 4 feet or 3.9 feet, which is the scenario that Maine is planning for the year 2100 from the Maine Wayne Climate Council work. And then I said, let's choose the number to establish this setback zone, which is the quote marsh migration zone. Use hat plus 3.9 or hat plus 125 feet, whichever is greater. Basically, this mostly 95% of this grabs undeveloped areas of the town. There are about 5%, maybe 10% of the town that's grabbed by this. And then that's where already developed tidally influenced areas would come into play. So you'd try to restore areas that are already developed a little bit. So the idea with this first column is to say, we recognize how important the marsh and its tributaries, its tidal tributaries are. We recognize that sea level is rising. We recognize that changes are already occurring and they're going to keep occurring. Therefore, we're going to give the marsh accommodation space to move. And to do that, we're going to establish this marsh migration zone, which is a setback for any new development, which is again, either hat plus 3.9 feet. So think of it as an inundation area. It's going to be wet in the future. Or hat plus 125 feet, whichever is greater. And I picked 125 feet kind of arbitrarily. I'll say that. It could have been 150 feet. But so this is the setback zone for areas around the marsh that are currently undeveloped. For new development, that's going to go in. Within that, the minimum vegetated buffer is, I've established 100 feet. It could be a different number if it's the hat plus 3.9.
Okay.
100 feet is for the hat plus 125. I don't know how we established the hat plus 4, which literally is a spatial area that's going to get wet. Maybe it's 50 feet less than that. I'm not sure how we do that one yet, but for that I put 100 feet in, which I think matches some of the setbacks that were already proposed as a vegetative buffer that was already proposed in some of the other tables that we've pulled together. No, it's a little bit more. 100 feet is a little bit more. It's about 25 feet more than a river, stream, or brook. 100, which was 75 feet in the table that was originally proposed. The vegetative buffer of 100 feet is to recognize that around the marsh is the most important area that we need to protect. We need to give it accommodation space to move and not mess with that. And that minimum vegetative buffer cannot include lawns or anything like that. It has to be native vegetation. So that was the thought I had on that. I went down in each column and created, on the left-hand side, you'll see markers. And basically, we're marking everything except for the least impact at all, because we want this stuff to be there when ownership transfers from property owner to property owner. And then I also thought about whether or not pesticides, fertilizers, forestry, and fences should be occurring in these areas. And then I also thought about shoreline stabilization structures. So some of these lots, this might be too much for this ordinance, I don't know, but I was thinking about this holistically from the standpoint of allowing the marsh to migrate and creating accommodation space. If we're doing all these things with buffers, but we're allowing seawalls or riprap to go in along, say, the Nonsuch River, that's not going to allow for marsh migration. So everything we did with buffers is for naught, besides creating some habitat space for critters to kind of move around. It's not doing anything for marsh migration. So therefore, you don't allow shoreline stabilization structures in this marsh migration zone. You require that living shoreline techniques be used if shoreline stabilization is proposed. Then I also thought about reconstructed structures. So let's say a house gets knocked down in a storm or somebody voluntarily rebuilds it. Well, in an undeveloped area, you don't really have to worry about that. So that's why it says NA. And then I provided sources for each. The next one was I thought of this from the standpoint of a lot of our area around the marsh is already developed. We can't expect houses that are already there to now go back and say, all right, well, you're gonna have to move your house. You can't do anything at all in your whole area. But we can take it and use it as an opportunity to try to restore things. So most of the places that are developed adjacent to the marsh have the most minimal buffer that you can imagine. It's 25 feet or less, probably. So the idea here, and we can look at the schematics later, is they restore 50 feet. How we fund that, I don't know. Maybe we tie it to improvements to a house. I don't know. But the idea here is to try to restore some of those vegetative buffers that have been removed over time.
So, can I?
Yeah.
ask a question? So with that, I'm trying to visualize, so you're saying, so this ordinance would be in place, so as redevelopment, so in this case, where your areas that are developed, it's redevelopment.
Yes.
So, okay, I just wanted to kind of walk through that, so that as you read, most of it, were you finding that most of that is residential use?
Yes.
Okay,
Except for, except for some areas around Route 1
and the industrial park
Yeah.
kind of stuff, that's what I was thinking, okay,
but it's almost all residential.
yeah.
So maybe
So
maybe-
if, so I guess I'm trying to picture as you redevelop it, then there's either lawn or there's structures. Within that 50 foot, because I agree, it's very close in some areas.
Right, so-
Yeah, how would you?
it might be helpful to go down
Mhm.
two slides, I think.
Oh, sorry, am I jumping ahead?
There we go. So this is the undeveloped one. This is
Okay.
how this would work.
Yeah.
This is, think of there's no house there, the house would be sited outside of the marsh migration zone. And leave 100-foot vegetated buffer. Between the house and the highest astronomical tide, which is. Or we have to figure out, like, if it uses the 4 foot. Of sea level rise and say it's 250 feet, we have to figure out how to establish that. Can you go down to the next one? So this gets at the one we were just discussing. So this is an existing house.
Yeah.
Which is already in this newly established marsh migration zone. The idea I had here was you can't really have new development in it. Let's say, I mean, maybe we can allow some improvements, I'm not sure where we wanna go with that. But you can't stabilize the shoreline in this zone.
Mhm.
If it's not already stabilized, you can't then go and put in a seawall, for instance. You have to use living shoreline techniques. And I don't know if we can grandfather this or how we deal with this, but because this is already in that area, maybe we establish a no pesticide or fertilizer use in this area. I don't know if we can do that legally or not. I just put it down. No new clearing of trees in this, so you've got what you've got, you can't clear more. And then, if possible, require restoration of at least a 50-foot vegetative buffer. So let's think, right now they have 5 feet at the edge, 10 feet at the edge. Think about Pine Point, for instance.
Right, I guess that's what I'm, yeah, trying to visualize a specific kind of, yeah, law and what we
Maybe
could
50
do.
feet's not the right amount, but
No,
the
no,
idea
I-
is to bring it back to something that's
Yeah.
more natural than what it is now. Because literally you've got a wall and then lawn to the edge of the wall. In many of these lots.
So, and that would be some, so requirement would be, encouragement by the town to do it, incentives by the town to do it.
Not sure,
To do the buffer?
Yeah,
yeah, to restore a vegetative buffer. I put,
Well, you're putting it in the ordinance, so
I put
it's,
below
yeah,
this, I'm
but
not
if
sure
you-
how we fund this.
right. But if you have a right, if you have a home, you're there and now there's a new ordinance that says 50-foot needs to be vegetative buffer.
Or,
Why?
what,
No, I mean, I know why, but
Oh.
say I'm a property
Oh,
owner,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Pine Point and now.
and you
this-
wanna add a garage to that house.
Well,
Right.
okay, so I'm changing something
I'm
about the
saying it's
house.
redevelopment, that's what I guess.
Right.
Or
Right,
the
so
house,
that's the whole point.
something happened, the house fell to the ground and now I'm gonna have to rebuild. So keep in footprint, move it back and add the buffer.
you try to move it back as much as
Yeah.
possible, then you
Okay.
add the buffer, yeah.
Autumn has her hand up.
Okay,
And this is.
Hey, I just wanted to say, I like where this is going, Pete, but I think first we need to establish the buffers for new development before we go down about existing development. I don't think we're gonna get very far if we start out with this in it. So I just wanted to bring the focus back to just new development. And if we can get that right and get that bought in, I think then we can start to talk about this. But if we put it together, if we marry the two, we may never get down the aisle.
That's fine, so then we would go back to the first slide. Or not the first slide, the first schematic.
Well, I guess
But-
that's what I
but-
was kind of heading down, like trying to make sure to try to figure out if someone wants to add, like, so redevelopment, it takes on a whole bunch of options, right? And what that means or could mean or couldn't mean.
Right.
And so you're gonna have 500 scenarios.
So let's not
So
get
that's
hung
why
up on that.
so I started going with,
Yeah.
here's one scenario.
Yeah, that's right.
however, in this process, I do like that we could advance the establishment of marsh migration zone, a coastal bluff erosion zone. Which Pete's been bringing forward for many years, having zones, but if we could have these zones and establish these ordinances for new development. And then over time, we're gonna talk about what does it mean if you are already there and you're having to rebuild a structure or build a new structure on your property.
So is, Autumn, are you thinking this is like an overlay or is this a zone? Like you saying
I
zoning?
called
so
it a
I'm
zone
curious.
because
Yeah,
we're using a different technique to define it, that's the only reason, it's really a setback.
okay,
Or area.
I
or
called it the
something.
marsh migration zone, it's.
If it-
It's a setback for all development to be outside of that, I just call it a marsh migration zone because that's what we really focused on last week. With our discussion, which is to give the marsh and its tributaries. Room to move in response to sea level rise, this is for tidally influenced areas only.
So it just depends on how we define it, if it needs to be defined graphically or it can be defined, with words. But it sounds like some sort of mapping overlay exercise.
Yeah, I mean, it's already done, if we
Yeah.
use that. Hat plus 3.9, it's already done, we've done it throughout the whole state.
We just need to identify that.
Yeah, and I just said hat plus 3.9 or hat plus 125 feet, whichever's greater.
So Pete, do we have to identify it then separately since it's already done? Is it something that changes on a regular basis?
No.
So,
This
okay.
might change in 2025 when hat changes.
Gotcha. So if it was defined as, hat plus 3.9 feet or 125, would that be something when the wetland delineation is being done through the wetland scientist survey, they would know what that is and that would get called out? Or is it something that we, the town, need to put on a map so they go identify it?
They would probably be identifying that elevation when they go out to
Okay.
do it. Because the maps are maps, they're done from they're done using LiDAR data, which is static data from whatever God knows year it was flown. So, when a surveyor goes out to define what the wetland is, they're gonna be shooting in elevations anyway. So it's pretty easy to define where hat is.
Okay.
And then hat plus 3.9 would be an elevation plus 4
Okay.
feet. And the states that the 3.9 should really just say 4 feet.
Okay.
We're not gonna be 1/10 of a foot accurate in terms
Sure.
of sea level rise projections.
Okay.
State, we adopted 4 feet, but 3.9 is what's in it's a long story. But so it would be, let's say your highest astronomical tide is 6.5 feet NAVD. It's 10.5 feet. The surveyor goes out and finds out where 10.5 feet is on the property. That's your setback.
Okay. Got it.
So
It's probably a lot easier than saying hat plus 125 even. But it's easy to do both because they both have to be surveyed in.
Okay.
is it too much to go to the next chart for time on the agenda?
We certainly can. I included bluffs in here, but we
Yes,
don't have that many
erosion.
bluffs in Scarborough.
Mhm.
They're along the Nonsuch River. They're along a little bit along in the Scarborough River area. And almost all the bluffs in Scarborough are not labeled, which means
Hmm.
they're mapped as bluffs. They have not been determined to be unstable, stable, or highly unstable.
Okay.
Basically, what that means is under shoreland zoning. Shoreland zoning says if it's not a mapped bluff with a assigned stability, you call it stable. It doesn't matter what it doesn't make, it could be falling off like there could be calving occurring and anything per shoreland zoning, the way it's written. It says if it's not designated,
Oh,
it's a stable bluff and it has the minimum setback.
wow. It's a
So
lot
I
of
think
work.
that's a big
Yeah.
hole
Mhm.
that we don't necessarily have to close as part of this, or we could try to close by defining these bluff
So
areas.
to your point though, that's a state standard, right?
That's shoreline zoning. So
Right.
it means it's part, yeah. it's
Right,
the
so-
state standards and
We'd be setting.
the town could go
that,
above
yep.
that through shoreline zoning. So we don't have to focus too much on bluffs. I just included that in there as an
Thank you.
example.
Yeah.
Under the next section, which is what you have up on the screen now. The non-tidal, I think this is the next most significant one, which is the non-tidal marsh tributary zone. So I called it that, and basically the idea here was for those key tributaries that feed into the marsh but are not tidally influenced. So think of the Nonsuch River, the Dunstan River, Libby River, Cascade Brook, and Spurwink rivers. Granted, Spurwink's its own thing, it's not really associated with Scarborough Marsh. These are the non-tidally influenced tributaries, creeks, and associated wetlands associated with those water bodies. But there are others. There's Stewart Brook, there's Millbrook, Finner Brook, Phillips Brook, and Red Brook. So should they also,
I mean, I think we could keep going.
In
Brett.
these key
There's-
areas.
There's a lot.
there are more. So this could apply to all of those areas. And the key here is it's establishing, again, a large setback, 125 feet, and the largest buffer of 100 feet. And basically providing the most stringent no pesticides, no fertilizers, no forestry at all. Fences could be done. And really, that's all that makes sense. I just don't know what consistent GIS source we use to define those, but I think the town probably has an idea.
And I know that this group is interested in pesticide and fertilizer use and restriction. I don't know that we can include it in this, I don't know that the process will move forward with those restrictions in there. I think it's definitely a worthy cause that this group should work on, but maybe outside of this specific process.
We had it in our original document,
Yeah.
in terms of fertilizer. But not
fertilizer use is in
pesticide?
there.
Both pesticides and fertilizers are really, really, really bad for the marsh. Really bad for the marsh.
Autumn has her hand up.
So.
Let's try to do it let's try to do it with our definition of and our words around what a vegetated buffer are, right? Then just say no, no, no. Let's do it a little bit different. So it's the same exact effect and try. How's that?
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's so good.
Yeah.
I like it, Autumn.
Yeah.
And I had to say it out loud, so I don't know how far it'll get, but
We can try.
we can try.
Giving away our secrets.
So the next one, I should have put significant because that applies to significant vernal pools. I almost picked the 250 out of thin air because I read a bunch of the links that Andrew commented on, Andrew Mackey, and provided. And I mean, there's talk of 750-foot buffers, and bigger. And I really didn't know where to go with that. So, and I'm not a vernal pool scientist. So I just thought they're really important to protect, and it's clear that they do need a much larger area for the critters to actually move, because critters will move from pool to pool. They'll move from pool to upland areas and then back to the pool. So I'm not sure how we actually bufferize. How we adequately bufferize those.
Hopefully they'll be located close to other significant resources that we're already protecting through part of this.
Yeah, but we only, according to the IF&W site, there was only one
There's-
significant vernal pool in town,
Mhm.
which there'd only be one that had that protection. What we do for regular vernal pools, we could defer maybe to the I think it was 75 feet that or was it 50 feet that the Portsmouth example used? I think it was 50 feet. Yeah, they used 50 feet for regular vernal pools and then 75 feet for, I guess, significant ones because it was red. So, and then the rest of them just kind of go right down the line, basically from the examples that were provided in the original document. They just increased the buffer sizes. So I went 25 feet wider, basically. For the wetlands between 1,000 and 10,000 square feet. I think, yeah, I went up to 50 feet. Kept a 25-foot vegetated buffer. Kept the same numbers that you guys had for river, stream, or brook, but I included in there wetlands greater than 10,000 square feet. So I lumped all those together and made that 175 feet. And then wetlands less than 1,000 feet, I upped to 25 feet for its setback instead of 5 feet. And reduced the vegetated buffer to 15 feet. So there's.
And
So
I was just gonna say Rita has her hand up.
anyway, that's the summary.
Thank you. I guess Rita.
Sure. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up on the vernal pools. I did a little research and followed up as Pete did on some of the resources that Andrew provided. And from my readings, it certainly seems like Best practices was definitely 100 feet setback from the highest level of the vernal pool. But more importantly, as I read further, the vegetated buffer is equally, if not more important, around that vernal pool. And as Pete suggested, it is anywhere from 600 feet to 800 feet to allow, you know, those amphibians to eat and drink and whatever they need to do. So it seems that we're really falling far short on the vegetated buffer end of this.
Thank you, Rita.
Thanks, Rita.
Can you put it on the galleries? Folks, I need to go back to seeing everybody. Dick, you had something you wanted to add?
Okay, I know vernal pools are important, and I think they came into consciousness about maybe 10 years ago, and there was a champion who stepped forward and identified the ecological importance of vernal pools. I predict in a few years, somebody, I don't know, maybe in Europe, but not in this country, is going to step forward and identify the significance of intermittent streams. And they're going to be equally significant ecologically. So you gave me the permission to go ahead and do research, and I contacted USGS, and I found out from Patricia Lombard of Augusta that, in fact, the intermittent streams and the ephemeral streams were taken off the maps after the 1940 topos. And I also talked to a person in Augusta at the DEP, and she said she would be very willing to put the intermittent streams back on the map if we're able to identify them, because she reports to USGS and is able to correct their actual findings. So I know tonight nobody's going to take my comments with any seriousness, but I think intermittent streams, especially in the headwater areas, are especially important. They've been taken off the map. I think we should put them on, work on putting them back on the map. We're not going to have huge buffers for them, obviously, but I think we ought to consider some buffers for intermittent streams. We have to identify them first before we can put buffers on them. So this is a project I would like to work on.
So thank you, Dick, and I disagree that we wouldn't take your comments with seriousness. So we take your comments seriously and appreciate your work. I think that what we need right now is to have a series of priorities or a list of priorities, like what is going to be our biggest move, and then we go to the next one and the next one. And I think there's real incredible opportunity for the commission to make an impact on these larger setback and buffer issues that we've just discussed. And then with more information that you can gather around intermittent streams and other areas, that would be really helpful.
No, it's going to take time.
Yeah.
Administration.
Yeah, and we don't want to wait for that while we,
Right.
put this on pause while we wait to gather all of our information. So, I just want to share what I know everyone shares. Massive appreciation to you, Pete, for this work that you've done. It really helps us a lot. We're very fortunate to have you in Scarborough and to have your mind and skills to bring us to this point. I really like this chart that you put together, and it makes it clear to me. I don't know how something like that can be translated to an ordinance, but for clarity's sake, this is really helpful. And I like the concept of establishing some sort of zones, and in a way that we can start to make an impact. I think it feels to me like we've got what we kind of need, and it's just a matter of working it out. Would you agree, Autumn? because I know you're really trying to pull all of this together and kind of balancing different needs and moving forward with a way that we can have some kind of update on our ordinances to be able to make this beneficial change.
Yeah, I think this has been really helpful. And if I can just say, hey, Pete, I might reach out and have some additional conversations with you. As Jamie and Angela and I work on the iterations of this, we can send over kind of drafts and get them ready for your next meeting, if that works for everybody.
Can I just ask, I guess maybe Pete a question too? I know kind of opened up the box here of the non-tidal marsh areas.
Yeah.
Really can include just about the entire town. So we need to figure out where are you guys looking to kind of hone in?
Yeah.
I know you started with some, and like you said, there's a lot that we could probably think of too, that are like,
Right.
oh man, I would love to throw that in there too, or this, but we need to figure out where we stop.
Yeah,
And
I think one way to approach that is,
because the definitions around these are gonna be super important for us to be able to
Right.
interpret for developers, and so,
right.
I mean, I guess I'm curious on this groups, how far they wanna.
I think,
Are
I
looking
think
at
at a
doing
minimum, those standards should be applied to the associated wetlands. For the Nonsuch, Dunstan, Libby, Cascade, and Spurwink rivers at a minimum.
And I
There's
guess, I'm gonna say staff's perspective, I would love to throw in our urban impaired stream.
Yeah.
Right, you
threatened.
just left, and threatened, you left off like Phillips and Mill, you put as question marks.
Yeah.
Those are our
they're urban
impaired and our threatened streams, so that's where so again,
Makes
I'm like
sense.
trying, I don't
So
wanna
that, I mean, that
to
would make,
grow it completely, but I also wanna make
But
sure
that
we
could-
capture the most.
but that could make
important.
sense then.
Yeah.
That includes these major
Major
tributaries
tributaries.
and
The sense.
Scarborough's threatened and impaired streams.
And for us, it would be our priority kind of watersheds, that's where I would be looking towards, and I don't know what you guys, if that's something you would support, or you wanna go further, or, but,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I can see you
Yeah.
supporting that, but I just wanna make sure that that's where, I guess I was asking. We
I
can
think
kind of add those in.
hugely helpful.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so. And then, I mean, one of Dick's resources from forestry in the Granite State included suggested riparian zones. I guess that's the setbacks. And no harvest zones for no cutting of trees. And then also at MNRCP habitat management areas that are required for all projects that receive MNRCP funding. I forget what MNRCP stands for, but it's
Resource protection, natural resource protection.
it's a fund that's used to restore wetlands.
Compensation.
Yes, compensation fund used to restore wetlands. And they have a very good guidance on how big some of these zones should be. Vernal pools, they suggest a 660-foot zone that includes a 100-foot no cut buffer, so different from what we proposed here, and more in line with who was it that talked about? I forget who mentioned. Oh, it was Rita who mentioned the size of the vegetated buffer and the connectivity between the two. So the numbers I put out there were just for consideration. They weren't the final numbers to use.
Right, and I think, but the guidance from Autumn was basically if there are sources that like. Science-backed sources that we can reference that lend some credibility to these numbers, so, I mean. Vernal pool, I think, is gonna be the sticking one because their science says that those numbers should be much higher than what's proposed.
Yeah, and this table that's in the research that Dick provided is literally from the MNRCP, riparian habitat management areas. And you know, their buffers go from 100 feet to 660 feet. Don't know if that's realistic for the town to pursue or not, but
All right, so I have a sense that we are encouraged by this work and encouraging Pete to work with Autumn and the planning team to take this just another step, and we'll come back in November and take a look at what we've drafted. With an eye towards getting it ready for long-range planning committee and moving it through that process. I think I'm getting general agreement. Good. Thank you again, Pete, and to the team as well. Oh, so we've got a little more than 15 minutes remaining in our time together, but it's also a good time to talk because Karen has joined us. Let's talk about the update on the open space ad hoc committee. And we have with our materials, a draft charge that came out of appointments and negotiation committee. Yes.
Yeah, so I will say, the charge that is in your agenda packet is not the most up-to-date one. I did forward another one through, after the agenda went back out. I'll make sure that the most recent one is included with the minutes for this meeting, and I can pull it up on the screen if that would be helpful for people to look at. But Karen, you can take it away.
Sure, thank you. So, I mean, the changes that we made were actually very minor. We brought it down to 9 voting members, and then the town council will not be a voting member, and they'll just have a liaison. So we just kind of changed the numbers a little, so it would make voting easier. So here we are with an ad hoc open space committee, and I think it was a good timing because I met with Autumn, Angela, and Jamie, and they had just finished, I think, the vulnerability study that they had done. And so they're going to be now starting the process of looking for a consultant for the open space plan. So I have no problem telling you that this was completely drafted by top-notch people. Autumn and Jamie got together, and I think what they did was they really brainstormed on how we could work with the town to accomplish this goal. I'm hoping everyone got a chance to look at it. I think maybe Autumn and Jamie could speak more to the specific contents of it, but I think our plan was to kind of keep it a little loose and give you guys the discretion to work with the consultant and the town to really kind of define what it'll look like detailed. But we'd love to have your feedback. I'm trying to push this along as fast as we can and get this organized so we can coincide with the town and their open space. I think they're going to hire a consultant, and then once they have the consultant on board, we're hoping to have this ready to go and with the consultant. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. I have a, and thank you, everyone. I have a process question. So where is this committee in the formation process?
So,
And when do we nominate a member?
so the council, this has only been seen by the appointments and negotiations committee. I'm not sure when it's going to land on a town council agenda. That was kind of Karen saying she's trying to move this process forward.
Great, okay.
So yeah, I don't know. I would think that we cannot, the commission can nominate someone at any time, and that will just be the recommendation to the council once the committee's officially formed.
Yeah, I can see about getting it on the agenda for our November meeting. And then again, I think it's going to really, it kind of kicks back to all the committees really within themselves nominating who they want to come forward. And we really I don't really want to get involved after that. Let you guys run with it and kind of work with the town and kind of figure out the best way to proceed. But I can see about getting it. I think we changed our meeting for November and we're meeting that Wednesday after the election. I can see about putting it on the agenda for them.
And just one more note that the thought for this committee is that it would really serve as the steering committee for the development of the open space plan.
Yeah, fantastic.
And
Dick has a question
Uh,
or a comment.
what is this group gonna do?
guide the development of the open
Open
space.
space is basically recreation oriented, and we've just had a recreation plan completed.
Mhm.
So is this going to be a natural resources inventory or conservation oriented? As opposed to a classic recreation open space plan?
It's not recreation and open space. It's related to conservation land and how the town can achieve 30 by 30 is kind of going to be the roadmap for achieving 30 by 30.
How does the town make decisions, and how do we inform the town in its decisions about what are priority spaces to conserve? That's what this group is
Okay,
gonna do
for
with the help
clarification, should this be put in the charge? In the committee?
of the committee.
In other words, if I don't understand it, other people are not gonna understand it as well, so somewhere there ought to be language that states where this is going, does that make sense?
Okay. I mean, so defining what an open space plan is?
This particular open space plan is, because classically, open space is related to playgrounds, sports fields, areas of recreation.
So then I think that would be I don't know that it needs. I think that's what this committee can help to further define. But it's not going to be recreation. We do, as you noted, we have a recreation committee and it's been doing work and we have a plan for recreation. I think I'm not
Right.
speaking.
Yeah, I wonder, for me, I look under the expectations, I think, and I think I want to tell you, we're trying to push this along and we kept it somewhat vague so we could push this along. We could spend 6 months trying to articulate what we want this to look like. I think what we felt was like timing wise, the town is literally in the process of hiring an open space consultant. And if we don't do it now, I actually don't know what the committee will look like in 6 months because the open space plan will be far along. And I think, I take Autumn's advice of that, it would be really beneficial to have residents involved in this whole open space plan. And I would like Autumn to probably speak more now as to it.
Hands up. Okay, thanks, Autumn.
Thanks. So Dick, I would just say when the request for proposals goes out for the open space plan, that will probably provide the more specific language that you're looking for. And so this group is going to be working with the town staff and the consultants to complete that open space master plan. And it doesn't have anything to do with recreation. If anything, there may be some passive open space provided, but it's really all about achieving the 30 by 30, working with Scarborough Land Trust, how we can amend our zoning ordinances, and all of those things that we need to do to really control development or to help development get steered in this 30 by 30 way. But I think the RFP will give you further guidance, and that will be put out before the steering committee comes together. So my thinking is that if you all can be planning on thinking about making a recommendation maybe at your December meeting, it would be great to have the committee, all the recommendations, and Karen may want it a little sooner, but ideally if we could have all the recommendations for January council, then we could have that kickoff, because I think that timing will probably work pretty good. So I know I'll get someone from Long Range Planning Committee and some other groups. And so just to give everybody, all of the different groups, a couple of months to think about who they want to put forth for that. And then to get that established in January will be great timing.
Thanks. And I see Jessica's hand up.
Yes, thank you, Randy. So I'm just curious about the RFP process and the consultant. If you could just walk us through the timeline a bit, and I apologize for the puppy in the background. So you've already issued an RFP, or can you, so is this committee going to be involved in writing the RFP for the request for proposal for the consultant? Just a little curious to know a little bit more about that.
Sure. So we're working on the RFP from a staff perspective, and it's not complete yet. We won't go out to public probably until the end of the year. So we're doing the vulnerability assessment first, that RFP. That one's a bigger project, longer term. And so we're trying to stagger them a bit. But we had originally thought about maybe having this group participate in the selection of the consultant process, and it may still happen, but we also wanted to be cognizant of timing goals to get this underway, like Karen mentioned. So we wrote the steering committee or the ad hoc committee language so that they would actually start to participate after we have the consultant on board. Does that answer your question?
Well, so I'm just a little full disclosure, I'm usually on the other end of the
Yeah.
RFP. So curious about the role of this commission. I understand that you just mentioned that maybe we'd be involved, the Conservation Commission, in review of the candidates. But
It wouldn't be the whole Conservation Commission, though. It would just-
no, sorry, my pause was, having an unclear scope of work or RFP, it costs a lot of money for a town because you haven't been clear with the consultant what you want from them. So I guess I'm a little, again, I apologize. I'm usually on the other side of the RFP, just professionally. So how we might be involved as a commission and where the writing of the RFP is, because that's a little cart before the horse, just dollars wise, to have the RFP issued before there's clarity on not only the role of the Conservation Commission, but also this open space committee.
Forgive me, but I'm kind of confused. So the open space master plan is part of the CIP process that we got approved through our town budget.
Right.
And we're, the Conservation Commission you'll be part of responses to the plan, but this ad hoc committee will be really the steering committee. So I don't know, the Conservation Commission is not writing the RFP, I guess, is what
More like what bigger picture, what the open space plan is, to Dick's point, and the roles and responsibilities of each of the existing committees and this new ad hoc committee.
Gotcha. And I can just honestly say we don't have the RFP ready yet.
But I guess if you were the cart before the horse, I think that's what staff is working. We also have a Red Brook management plan going out for RFP. We have the vulnerability assessment. We have a lot of big things that are a little bit ahead of this.
Mhm.
So for staff right now, it's not that we're not putting a clear and defined scope together. It's just not well defined to provide Conservation Commission or whatever ad hoc to look at it. It doesn't mean we're not doing it. It made it sound like you were thinking we were just going to come out with an RFP for some general, give us an open space. That's not the staff's intention. It's that we haven't had the time to invest in drafting that very defined scope yet.
I think it is great that we're being helped by having this move ahead, because we do want to keep pace with this whole process that we did so much work up to the workshop for the council, and we got the 30x30 resolution adopted unanimously by the council. We have this exciting opportunity to develop an open space plan again for the town. And I think we're all just trying to keep everything moving apace. And I don't think that there's going to be any intention to have something go ahead before something else. So I think what I'm hearing, in addition to what Jessica is saying, is resident contribution opportunities to help define the RFP and identify the consultant, rather than here's the consultant and here's the committee, now you all work together.
So is that what Conservation Commission is looking as a role? Or is that?
We would, so I see it as, we have a role through the liaison that I'd like to suggest we nominate a liaison from this commission next month. So we'll do it before December's suggested deadline, but let's have a liaison that we vote on next month, or liaison / committee member. And that committee, when it's put together, is involved in review, helping shape the RFP and making sure it's clearly defined. I like Jessica's suggestion not to have a pretty clearly defined RFP for a consultant, and then we're merging these two moving pieces.
I will just say that our goal was to have the RFP out by the end of the year. And
Awesome.
so
But that won't happen
But
based
that-
on your time.
But the
However-
timelines aren't going to.
But what's, okay,
So-
let me pose, what's to prevent a group of citizens coming together to help work with staff in developing an RFP, whether, you know, and maybe this group of citizens, some of them in the future become an ad hoc committee.
Well, I wanted to say if Jessica has an example of good RFPs or even bad
Right,
RFPs
okay.
that she has viewed or responded to that she's willing to share, please send them our way. Happy to hear.
And that's why it sounds like this group actually has probably
Some energy and
their-
interest, yeah.
the resources around that maybe that
Okay.
want, rather than trying to move different pieces forward. I guess that was my question.
And I'm happy to help with that process. I've responded to a lot of RFPs and also helped develop RFPs. And I think professionally, the most challenging piece is when I come in and I bid something and people don't really know what they want, right? Like you want to make sure you're clear with your consultants, so you're not wasting their very expensive time trying to, lack of a better term, herd cats as to what your client or community wants. And I'd prefer to have clarity on what we want as a community from the outset versus and get a very workable, forward-looking product than spend time trying to define what we want. And I don't mean that by a conservation commission, I mean that as Scarborough. Because that pre-work is incredibly helpful to direct a consultant, because they can spend a lot of time, expensive time in like doing circles about, okay, what do you want? What questions do you want answered? And if we have that up front, then we're much more effective.
Thanks, Jessica. Autumn and then Karen.
So I would just propose that maybe we sort of merge the two ideas for timing. We are writing the RFP and it's in our time frame to get that done by the end of the year. So maybe a good way to have Conservation Commission weigh in on it is to give you all a draft for your December meeting, because your November meeting, you're going to be spending time making sure that the environmental standards and the resource protection setbacks are ready to go. And then in December, maybe if you all can be sort of that reviewer of the RFP, I don't know if we need, and that would be helpful. And then getting this ad hoc committee, things take time through council, and Karen's probably gonna, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she's probably gonna say these things, while we wish they could happen really quickly, do take a couple of months to get things going because they have to go through all the different processes. So if we can, December, you all review the RFP, make a nomination for who's going to be on the ad hoc committee. And then if it works out, maybe the ad hoc committee is involved in the selection process, because I think that's really helpful to have that weigh in, and then we could keep on track for January, February start time. But I think if we get too bogged down in meetings, especially over the holidays, trying to get a group to craft the RFP, and then I don't want us to get too behind is all I'm really trying to say. But I think we can use this group to review it, and that would be really helpful.
Thank you. Karen?
Sure. I'm going to disagree and say I think the Conservation Commission should focus on other things. I think the planning, I personally think the plan, when I met with planning, they are doing their job and they have a schedule that they are sticking to. I think Autumn is very good at her job. I'd like her to stick to her schedule. I think what I saw with the Community Services Rec Advisory Board is we have a member on that board who happens to also be a parks director in Portland, and Todd Souza literally pulled him into his meetings. One of my proposals is that the town continues their process, and if people want to be involved, they can be invited to the interview process or whatever. If someone has experience in this and can bring it to the table. One of the conversations we had was what we really want conservation spending their time on. That we don't want you guys bogged down with the open space committee and plan. I mean, I think my preference is for you guys to be talking about the stuff that helping with the planning and the ordinances and things like that. I will say after this conversation, I don't know if I can bring this to town council. It doesn't really sound like this is what you guys are looking for. We came to you with a proposal that we thought, that I worked with Autumn and Jamie and Angela with, that we thought would coincide and work good, considering we're doing the open space plan. I'm hearing a lot of different feedback, and I don't want to proceed if you guys are not liking the vagueness of what we've proposed and the speed at which we are. I worry about speed. I have no idea who's going to be our chair next year, and if they'll care about conservation, if they'll like me and they'll put my stuff on the agenda. I don't know. And so it is something I would like to try to continue to move forward. I am new as a liaison, but I've watched the community services go through this with the master plan that they just did. And that's why I'm making that suggestion tonight. And so, I mean, I think you guys are gonna, it's 7:30. You guys are gonna have to email me and let me know what you guys are thinking.
I think that's really helpful perspective. I don't think we need to be prescriptive. I think vague is good. However, I do think that the overarching goals need to be defined before you issue an RFP. For example, do we want the consultant to identify priority parcels? I'm not saying we do. I'm just saying that could be a goal of an open space plan, and that needs to be clear before you issue an RFP. So I don't think it needs to be prescriptive and detailed, but the overarching goals do need to be defined before an RFP is issued. That's my personal opinion.
And we've been talking about this ad hoc committee for a few meetings now. We have been eager to recommend somebody from this commission to the ad hoc open space committee. So there's no slowdown on this commission to support the committee. We've been eager to see it established, and we're ready to go. And if we if to have citizen input before committees formalized by the town council, we're available. There are a number of members of the commission who are ready to be support for that. So thank you. Let's see what is next on the agenda, which is, I mean, we've done a lot in the last couple months. We've got the Spurwink Marsh restoration.
Yeah, so this is just an update. So there was funding in the town's fiscal year 24 capital improvement budget to match a grant that was being put forward jointly with the town of Cape Elizabeth and the town of Scarborough to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation to start basically planning for marsh restoration of the Spurwink Marsh. And part of that may include removing Sawyer Street that crosses the marsh on the border of Scarborough and Cape Elizabeth. After we went through the municipal budgeting process and the town committed $35,000 match to that, that proposal, the Maine Natural Resources Compensation Program, MNRCP, approached Cape Elizabeth saying that they heard about the project and they have wetland restoration funds for Southern Maine available that they would be interested in allocating towards that project. And encouraged us to apply. So that pot of money is a little bit different from the initial pot of money that that the towns were applying for, in that we need to do construction as part of that proposal. So the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation proposal was for right around $320,000. The MNRCP funding is for $1.8 million. So we'll be really seriously looking at if that funding is successful. We'll be doing a lot of outreach to the abutting property owners to start talking about potential and likely road removal and what that means and what they want to, would they support that? I will say the homeowners, landowners on the road at a meeting that we had in the spring of 2022 indicated that they would be supportive of not having that as a through road any longer. But there's a whole lot more legwork that needs to happen. Likely this winter, if that proposal is successful. So this is really just intended as an FYI, as a first step, because we also, staff have been talking with Tom Hall about it and how best to kind of inform council that this may be coming. But we should know, I would say, I think in December, about both proposals. So we did apply for both grants. We will not accept both if they are, if they're both funded. And we would likely lean towards the MNRCP funding, the $1.8 million, because we're getting our planning and implementation funding in one go. So that was really just a heads up to make you aware. We'll likely be talking more about that effort in the future once we know the status of the proposals that are in.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much.
I'll just say a quick aside, I paddled that whole stretch of water during one of the last king tides, all the way, it goes to the back of the Wiley Recreation area.
Yeah.
And it's astounding. I forget, it was about 8 miles total.
Wow.
And it was gorgeous. But I will tell you right now, do not try to go through the culvert at high tide.
No, yeah, how did you even fit? I mean, the culvert's almost
Go
over.
through the culvert at mid-tide.
Oh, my gosh. No.
You shouldn't go through the culvert anytime. Pete. It's not
It's
like
fine.
portage over.
Anyway.
So, and this is a really unique project because a lot of municipalities are looking at maintaining infrastructure and raising infrastructure. I mean, we're gonna be talking about it on Route 1.
Mhm.
And no other municipalities in Maine are talking about actually removing infrastructure and doing restoration. So this is a huge initiative if we, get the funding and can get support around this project.
Yeah, that workshop was good, and it's nice to hear the broad support from landowners.
Yeah.
Contiguous. 2024 meeting dates? What is
Yeah.
that gonna take, Jamie?
This is gonna be a quick one, well, I hope it's gonna be a quick one. So planning board is changing their schedule,
Oh.
so that they're only meeting once per month instead
Whoa,
of every 3 weeks.
whoa, revolutionary.
And so in order for the commission to be able to weigh in and provide input to the proposals or the design plans coming through, we will need to change our meeting date from the second Monday to the first Monday.
Oh, okay.
And so wanted to get everybody's thoughts and feedback on that. I'm hoping it will be a quick discussion. Hopefully people will be available the first Monday instead of the second Monday. And we'll have a couple conflicts with holidays,
Mhm.
which, in order to be able to still comment on planning board plans, we would have to plan to meet on Tuesday as opposed to the following Monday.
Monday. Mhm.
I'll have a conflict every other.
Oh,
Of course you will, Pete.
Francis Harbor Marsh meets the first Monday
oh,
every other month.
but the
No,
Town of Scarborough's
4 times.
planning board is changing how it meets.
Right.
And the Conservation Commission is changing how it meets.
Right.
And Francis Scarborough Marsh. Can they take our second Monday and we take their first Monday?
I'll ask them.
Yeah, that would be hard to miss you, and so it would be the whole block of time.
Yeah, it's the same exact time,
Oh, okay.
6 to 8. maybe.
All right, so I generally it feels like a thumbs up, although it's a thumbs down if it's like 6 times repeat. It's not.
It would be, I'm sorry, it's quarterly. So,
Oh, okay.
Oh,
so. that's-
Two times Pete won't be able to join us. Thumbs up generally, it seems like.
does anyone have a conflict on a first Monday other than Pete?
Great. Okay, let's hope it's, okay, thank you for that. I'd like to skip ahead because we've been not talking about Sustainable Scarborough Day this whole time, when it was a massive success and accomplishment, the work that this commission has done with the Sustainability Committee and other partners, and the great call outs in the news media, and the success of the day, the number of people who attended, everyone learned. I welcome Rita and Marla to make comments about the day. With thanks, and then not to mention that there was a really successful presentation at the library. I wasn't able to see it yet, but that was highly regarded as well. So there's been a lot of work done in between that we haven't even touched on yet.
Okay, I guess I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Rita and Jamie, but I guess, yeah, we've had a successful speaker series so far. Our first talk, Jamie spoke about the work that she's doing on the impaired streams in Scarborough, and it was actually really fascinating to learn more about what Jamie does when she's not in these Conservation Commission meetings. And Greg Byther from Friends of Scarborough Marsh came, and he is the water quality monitoring volunteer. So he helps coordinate the collection of all these samples. And so we had about 23 people come out for that, according to Elsa Rowe at the library. And then for our next presentation, which was our own Pete Slavinsky and Kirsten Puryear, ecologists with the Maine Natural Areas Program, they presented information about marsh migration and sea level rise. And we had an even better turnout, about doubled. So we had 56 people either in the room or online. John Anderson introduced the speakers, and he mentioned that he wished there were that many people at town council meetings. So it was a great turnout, and it was really fascinating. Thank you, Pete. It was fascinating. And I just truly believe that there should be a workshop on sea level rise and marsh migration in front of the town council. That's my personal opinion, but we have an expert here on our Conservation Commission. I think we need to keep these issues front and center, and it also goes along with the 30 by 30, and I think we really need to put that in front of the town council consistently, because this is going to be a larger and bigger issue with time. So then we had Sustainable Scarborough Day on October 1st, and it was a huge success. Thank you, Jamie. She coordinated all of it. And Allison Carrier was also really instrumental. She's town's communications manager, and they did just a fantastic job. We had beautiful weather. We had, I guess, approximately 200 people. We had tons of vendors and, speakers, and you can read about it in the report, but really kudos to Jamie. And I think Jamie's got some more she probably wants to say as well about Sustainable Scarborough Day.
Like it's at least 11 months away.
No, I've already started planning for next year. What are you talking about? We'll have our wrap-up committee meeting tomorrow. We did send out evaluations to the 25 vendors that were there, and then the sustainability committee collected email addresses for people. Basically, they gave us their email address to join our e-newsletter mailing list, and they were entered into the raffle for the heat pump water heater and some other things. So we sent evaluations out to those people who gave us their email addresses also, and got some really great feedback. Some constructive, which we're grateful for, because that's the only way that we're going to make things better, but overall very positive. People want to see it become an annual event in Scarborough, and I think that is our intention. So
That's great.
Mark your calendars for 2024. And so, yeah, we've already kind of talked about, I've literally already started thinking about next year's and what we're going to do now to prepare, because things the planning, even though it happened over 9 months, we should have started even sooner to kind of accommodate and make happen what the feedback was telling us should happen. But overall, it was great. There was a good variety of topics covered. And I think, I don't know that it was the usual suspects that come out. It was pretty steady, the full 4 hours. And I think we attracted people that don't necessarily come to the workshops and the talks and things like that. So hopefully we can grow it and reach more people next year.
Terrific. Congratulations to everybody. We have, I see Dick's hand raised, and I really, like, we're 16 minutes over, and that's really paining me right now.
We didn't meet last month.
Oh, okay, we didn't meet last month. Okay, so I would like to talk about the other items just in real speed record time. Dick, your comment or question?
No, let's go ahead.
Okay. Town council?
Sure. So out of that productive meeting that I had with Autumn, Angela, and Jamie, we were talking about creating a planning board conservation commission liaison, which I'm kind of surprised we didn't think of earlier, because the planning board has liaisons to the transportation commission, our committee, the long range planning and sustainability. So we were thinking of proposing that to further integrate the conservation commission into the planning process, which means a planning board member would then be a liaison to you guys.
Okay.
Coming before town council, as you guys know, is we have a large land deal for the school. I am very disappointed that some of the zoning changes that are part of that land deal did not come to the Conservation Commission for their consideration. If you guys have any feedback in regards to the zoning changes, I encourage you to express those to town council, show up, send us some emails. Some of the proposals are changing buffers from 100 feet to 15 feet. And converting 36 acres where you could only do 4 units per acre to now 20 units per acre, which I feel like maybe the Conservation Commission might have some comments on. And then lastly, I just wanted to reiterate what was said earlier, was that I really enjoyed Pete's presentation. I think it was really great. I feel like I could watch it a million times and learn something new every time. One of the things in Pete's presentation was he identified specific land next to the marsh that Scarborough owns, and he was saying, why isn't this conserved? And my question back to you guys is, why isn't it conserved? Maybe Jamie can help us figure that out, but that was one of the things that came out of that presentation that I would like to know. That's it.
Thank you. And I would see the building of this massive impervious space in town that the town is likely to be undertaking, adopt conservation principles that the Conservation Commission has been talking about for quite some time. It's an opportunity for the town to express and show how it's standing behind conservation and sustainability practices. And so thank you for bringing that up. And I would echo what Karen has said, that we need to speak up about that. Planning board.
So for our next planning board, I believe Eric just sent you all the current proposals. We have an Aroma Joe's there at Bridges Drive that I would encourage you to look at. There are a few other site plans on there, but that was the one that was most impactful, I think, in the new listing that went out a few weeks ago. I guess it's probably about a week and a half ago now. And then our next meeting is on the 30th, but I don't have anything other significant. The zoning changes that Karen is talking about, there's 2. One is from Higas Parkway to the Crossroads Plan Development proposal. It's about 9 acres. And then there's one for 34 acres, I believe. On the other side, it's in between the Crossroads Plan District and Warren Woods right now. And so those are the 2 zoning areas. Those are going to public hearing, first reading next Wednesday, council. So those are not finalized yet. And then planning board looked at the buffers at our last meeting that were proposed. And the planning board did make some recommendations to maintain that 100-foot buffer, especially as it applies to the Warren Woods adjacency. And then they recommended to maintain the existing 100-foot buffers that are in the downs already now. And so there's 3 parts to that recommendation. I can answer any questions you have about that one offline as well. That's all I have.
Thank you. Sustainability Committee?
They are working with Autumn to bring forward a commercial PACE. So PACE is property assessed clean energy. It's an ordinance that the town would need to adopt that basically opens up new funding options for commercial property owners to access funding for efficiency projects. So the town already has a residential PACE ordinance. We've had that in place since 2010. The state legislature just passed legislation to allow a similar program to be established for commercial property owners. So working on that, and then also continuing to work on proposing a source of dedicated funding for sustainability projects. So that will be going hopefully to the finance committee. A memo will be sent by the end of this year to the finance committee with that recommendation or request.
Thanks. And Parks and Conservation Land Board, Jessica had to step off. We're over time. Is there any update that you're aware of?
I don't have an update.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so next meeting, the 13th, we've got a lot on the agenda already. And that should be a great meeting. Thank you all. Motion to adjourn. Yes,
Motion to adjourn.
excellent.
Second.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you all.
your time, and my apologies for going over, but we had a lot to discuss and didn't quite nearly celebrate enough all the successes over the last couple of months. So thank you.
See you all in November.